Okay, so I'm about to hop on the line with a guy called Scott Cunningham, and he reached out to me with a blog post that he created called "Why I Sold All My Hex," and that was quite a lot of information actually, and it was posted a year ago. So let's see what he has to say for himself. He's coming on the line now. So let's start just with a brief intro about yourself and why we're having this conversation.
Sure. A little about myself. I'm Scott Cunningham. I went to school for networking and IT security for 4 years, graduated, and then I started diving into blockchain. Um, I work as a social media manager, and I wanted to start diving into crypto social media and blockchain social media. So I've been doing that for quite some time. And during that process, I've been, looking at a lot of different things, reviewing projects, and I started to get into a little bit of investigations, I guess, and looking into certain projects that I think are, not up to a scruff, and I think people should be somewhat warned about because, it's hard to get information. And there's a lot of new people coming into the space, and one of those projects that I looked at was Hex, and yeah, I guess we'll dive into the rest.
The post that you sent me, that's one of yours, right?
Yeah.
That was a year ago that it was posted. So as I understand it, Hex, they're about to have their second year anniversary, or whatever you want to call it, birthday. So were you there at the very beginning, 2 years back?
Not from the very beginning, but extremely early. I would say within the first few months, I caught wind of Hex. And originally, like most people, I was very enthused, and I bought some, and it went up. But as I looked into it a little bit more, I decided that I didn't think it was ethical and like good for me to be invested in any amount or endorsing it tacitly by being invested. And so I did a more deep dive, and then I posted that post.
Yeah, okay, and that's when you exited completely.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, so a large part of the post orbits around Richard being the origin address owner. How how would you go about proving that? Because so many people obviously believe it's got to be him, yada yada yada. But he's dodging the question, and he has been for a long time. So how would you go about, as an investigator? How would you go about proving that?
Well, I guess I would say two things. It's pretty much impossible to prove, but aside from the fact that like he knows what's going on with that address and he's mentioned it in live streams before, which I've linked. But it doesn't actually matter whether or not it's him. The issue is that someone has access to all of the Ethereum, and and it was withdrawn. And then shortly after, we saw Hex spike. So regardless of if it was Richard or someone else, someone was using all that to manipulate Hex. At least that's what it appears to be the case, and that's what I've covered.
Right. Okay. So this kind of behavior is you know quite prevalent in the crypto industry at large, right? So,
Yeah, we just
but
had Squid Game token, so
exactly, it repeats itself. It seems there's a difference with what Richard seems to appears to have built with this sort of a completely enthralled community that just haven't got a bad word to say about the guy. There's this there's this cultish type behavior that he manages to manage. So
yeah.
is that a defining difference between his project and others, do you think?
No, I see this behavior with a lot of projects. One project in particular that this is reminds me a lot of is So Me, as well as BitClout. BitClout, in terms of when BitClout started, the owner was getting everyone's Bitcoin, and then the owner could then take that Bitcoin and buy more Bitcoin with that Bitcoin in an infinite loop. The same issue that was presented for the first year of Hex. And with SoMe, the issue there was, well, I mean, they had a fractional reserve system, and there's a lot of problems with that, but their cult-like following, they would ban anyone who would, ask questions, or like I asked questions in the Telegram group and I was banned. Eventually they had to delete the Telegram group, and then, it continues to go on. It's just another social media platform with the ONG cryptocurrency. And I find that this is the case a lot of times. It's perpetuated by, all these people being invested and their finances are on the line. So they kind of have to do this, and or they feel that they have to, as well as, banning people from telegrams who are dissident or whatever it happens to be. And then you only end up with those, like cultish loyal followers at the end. And it is true that every time I've ever mentioned Hex or, criticized it, I get a ridiculous amount of backlash from the Hex community on Twitter. Sometimes even, threats and like pretty intense stuff. But it is what it is. There's a lot of toxic communities on Twitter, and crypto has its own version of that. So
yeah, and I guess this staking, this 5555 that everybody goes on about in Hex, they're staked up for like 15 years or something. This is all. For me, this is like a big, curious part of the whole cult. Like, how do you maintain this kind of behavior amongst thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people? I don't know, but if you lock them into something so long, it's very very difficult for them to leave, right? That's a different.
And they can technically leave, but they will lose all of their profits by doing so, and they'll just get back their original stake. So it is possible to leave, but all of that time that you've invested will essentially be for nothing if you do unstake. So
yeah, right. But okay.
Plus, there's a ton of penalties and fees that they will have to pay to Richard, so and other stakers.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. In the in the article, you say Richard Hart, he claims to have he uses the scam mythology, if you like, to convert people into honest people. Is the quote? How can you talk on that a little?
So he mentioned in a live stream, and I believe I've linked it in the article, that he said, I believe the exact quote was something like, even people who used to be scammers have found Hex, and it's converted them into honest people because they can use Hex instead of the previous things that they've scammed. But in my mind, it's just them finding the next scam token. So I believe it was Trayvon. He's a very, very, very popular crypto YouTuber who was very mixed up in BitConnect. And then he went on to Hex. CoffeeZilla, if you're aware of him, also interviewed him, and they discussed Hex and BitConnect. And CoffeeZilla said, yes, Hex is obviously a scam. I actually had an hour-long conversation with him about that because I wanted him to cover it, but he didn't feel it was relevant at the time. But he did agree. And yeah, it's very, very interesting that that is the case. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I've the Trayvon character has come up on the radar a number of times. I will try to track that guy down because he seems like he's very, very, yeah, he's embedded there. So okay, so talk on the flush addresses. The flush addresses are related to the origin address somehow.
So it's a little different. The origin address is where all of the fees and such go, and copies of bonuses, whereas the flush address, I might have mixed this up earlier when I mentioned it. My apologies. The flush address is where, for the first year, when people could send their Ethereum to the flush address and receive a certain amount of Hex to buy their Hex originally. That was how they were minting the Hex. But it was essentially just you sent Ethereum to supposedly Richard, and then new Hex was just printed out of nothing and then just sent to you. So it wasn't like you were buying Hex, you were printing it out of nothing and then he was getting the Ethereum. The issue is that when Ethereum was withdrawn from the flush address, shortly after, there was massive pumps in Hex, which would lead many to believe that he just withdrew the Hex, and then, I mean, he withdrew the Ethereum and then just printed more Hex to artificially, create, like, make it seem like there's a lot of volume and manipulate the markets essentially. So the OA address is where all of the copies of bonuses and fees for, unstaking early, things like that, and that would all go to the OA address. And again, I believe Richard has access to both, but he has not really confirmed as such.
Exactly, and that's for what I understand to be legal reasons around it being a security token, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this leads into Richard's famous term "pumpamentals." Can you talk a little on on artificial pumps in Hex, and in general the pumpamental philosophy that he appears to?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, when he's talking about pumpamentals, he's saying that the way that Hex is designed is that it's going to pump, um, which you could argue maybe is true or not. At least it was designed in the code originally to be that way. And this can't really happen anymore because the flush address, the printing of Hex, was only for the first year. But within the first year, there were specific days when, and I've marked this all in the article, specific days when millions of dollars worth would be withdrawn, and shortly after we would see massive pumps on Hex. One example was, I believe I've got right here, I'm just looking through my article. In January, about $7 million worth were withdrawn, and shortly after, in April, there was a 10x on Hex. It went up from 0.005 to 0.006, or 0.005 to 0.006, and that's essentially close to a 10x. And then there's another example of this where in another, sorry, I'm just trying to find this in my sheet here, but there was two examples where this happened, and it was very clear as to what happened, and I've noted it in the article. But essentially, there was two examples where this happened, and it was very, very obvious that money was withdrawn. It's on the blockchain, obviously, and then we saw a massive pump in Hex shortly after, which again would lead you to believe that since the Ethereum did end up back in the Ethereum address over time, that it was then used to print more and artificially inflate the value, or at least artificially make it seem like there's a lot more volume trading to entice people to believe that there's more reason to be investing because there's more hype and more interest in Hex.
Yeah, and on the volume, I don't know if you're aware, but there is currently a legal suit happening.
Really? I am not aware. I would love to add that as an append or something into this into the article.
Yeah, so from what I've gathered, CoinMarketCap are being accused of gatekeeping Hex's market cap. They believe, if you look at them on Etherscan, Etherscan or Nomics or Jack's Wallet, they're placed in third position based on the market capitalization. Obviously, if you look there, you can see a massive drop in volume in comparison to Ethereum and Bitcoin, and so they believe that they're being unfairly treated. And from what I've understand, the Hexican community, or some of the community members, have brought a suit that is now been accepted by, I think it's Binance that own CoinMarketCap. So that's just getting warmed up now. Now, interesting. Yeah, I think that is interesting because it begs the question: what Richard often calls these vanity metrics, and so it begs the question why is this so important to them? Outside of the marketing opportunity and the attention that they would get. I mean, is it possible that they've been able to manipulate the trading volume or what have you to get into that third position right underneath Ethereum on Etherscan, and some, that's quite a lot of attention that they've that he's managed to gather for himself there. Talk a little bit on how you believe he might have crafted such an outcome for himself or for Hex.
Well, I mean, yeah, like I said, with the what I believe to have been artificially manipulating the volume for that year there, where we saw a lot of the kind of hype around Hex and a lot of the biggest runs on Hex, I believe that was a big factor. Of course, he's a character. He goes on live streams and says things that you wouldn't expect people to be saying. And yeah, he's really crafted a marketing scheme around this. I would also say he's said himself on live streams that the main way that new money is coming into Hex is through onboarding. So that's very clear to the people in Hex that they need to get new people to buy Hex to continue to get Hex to be continuing and going up in price. And Richard has said this himself. That is kind of the main thing, because there isn't a lot that you can really do with Hex. I mean, it's not accepted as payment anywhere. No one uses it for tipping. It's on Ethereum. So, gas fees are ridiculous. You can't really use it as like a digital cash or, pretty much anything that you can really think of. The only actual use case for Hex is just staking it, which I would argue is not a use case. That's just a consensus model. There's 1 million coins that have staking, and every single DeFi coin in existence has that. Their real main utility is the certificate deposits, but that's just like a different feature of staking, I would argue. But again, I think a lot of this has just been around the marketing, and they know that they need to have new users coming on. So that's been a massive push. Originally, you were getting tons of people earning a lot of Hex just through referrals and things of that nature. So I think that was kind of the main way that they were doing that. And yeah, I mean, I'm not totally sure about the lawsuit. I'm definitely going to look into that. I appreciate you bringing that up, but I don't have a lot of background information on that right now.
No, there's not a lot of public information just yet. But okay, so are you aware of Pulse Chain coming the end of the year? People are suggesting he's going to basically, well, he's doing a snapshot of Ethereum blockchain with all the dApps coming over and all the and people are talking about it being a ghost town of dead, projects, or that basically it's just going to be a mess. But have you any expectations about what he's up to there? Because Hex is a smart contract, but now he's about to launch an entire, blockchain of his own. What do you anticipate happening in the coming months after that launches?
So I haven't looked deeply into the tokenomics of what Pulse Chain is. I understand that it's going to be kind of like a copy of everything. But it's fairly common, I would actually say, for people who create, I'm not going to actually say it's 100% a scam, but people who create sketchy projects, let's say, tend to very soon after create new sketchy projects. For example, BitClout just recently announced that they're coming out with a new project. So and so me is doing a bunch of stuff, and they're coming out with some new stuff. So it's very interesting that the best coin ever only gets hype for a couple of years before you have to move on to a new project, which I found interesting. But yeah, I mean, I expect to have the same kind of issues and ethical concerns as to how it's managed. And I'm not very aware of the tokenomics and such yet, because I haven't really done a deep dive. But yeah, I don't see it being for the people, or like an ETH killer or anything of that nature. But I don't discount that the price may skyrocket, because it seems like scams today, or just terrible projects, seem to go up the fastest in value. So I'm not discounting that it could still be worth something, because the biggest criticism I get for any kind of feedback that I do or reviews, whether it's Hex or BitCloud or anything, the biggest criticism that I get is, yeah, well, the price went up, so you're wrong. And it's like, well, all of these things are still true, and the price can go up. It's not like they're somehow, one can exist without the other. It's like, no. Obviously, people can still ignore everything that I wrote, and they can still go and invest. And I'm assuming most people haven't read what I wrote. A lot of people in the Hex community were saying, no, don't read this because I can earn a small amount of money from people reading my article because it's a decentralized blockchain platform, and that's how a lot of them work. And a lot of them are saying, no, don't read this from Scott because you're helping him earn money. Not, and I'm like, okay, well, I mean, you can read it somewhere else, but it's interesting that they're trying to prevent people from learning more about these caveats and things, because a lot of this information comes directly from their websites. Like, for example, I don't know if you're going to get to this later, but stakehex.com, who was partnered with Richard, they closed down and posted a notice saying, due to evidence of possible market manipulation of Hex, I can no longer recommend Hex with a clean conscience. And they shut down Stake Hex. And I find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, I got to the bottom of the article, and I did see. I had a look. That page is still live today. So,
Good.
yeah, no, it's I think up to now I've interviewed 9 Hexicans, they call themselves, and I'm looking. Honestly, I think with my approach, I'm trying to reach a broader audience, and so I'm leaving some of the more technical details and the financial stuff out of the
Yep.
picture, and I'm looking more at the cultural, philosophical behaviors within the, not just within Hex, but actually I think there's something to be learnt from the Hex community that is applicable to the industry in general. So, if you could talk a little bit on what what has Richard created a template, or maybe he's copied this template from elsewhere, or has he just gathered a bunch of things that already existed, and created something that's not new, but I'm looking basically at the broader context for the industry itself. So if you can comment a little bit on that would be very helpful.
Yeah, and I'll say this about Richard. He did this very intelligently. Whenever he's questioned about, whether or not it's a scam or a Ponzi, he will read out the definition and he will say, technically, it is, well, not even technically. He'll just say, it is not that by definition. So then he's like, well, then I'm good because by definition, exactly, it is not this thing. But common red flags of fraud are, for example, difficulty receiving payment. So, your Hex is locked for 5-10 years. The earliest joiners take from new participants, the way that Hex is designed. Incentivized to bring on new people who may not receive the same benefits. People who might join, they might stake, they might miss their stake, they might unstake early, they might not get those benefits. Complex fee structure, that's very clear. Unregistered investment, high returns with little or no risk, and overly consistent returns. I think it checks off almost every single one of those boxes. So yeah, red flags of fraud, that I find that very interesting, but by definition, technically it is not a scam. I would say, yeah, he's done this very, very methodically. And I don't know if it's like a template for others to do the same thing, but there's very little accountability in crypto. And I see these kinds of projects popping up left and right. I just recently covered crypto endorsements from celebrities, of which there's been, an infinite amount that have either been scams, they've been fined straight up by the SEC, they not disclosed, or, even if they just endorse something, but now it's down 90+% in value. So, it's very, very interesting to me that a lot of people just jump into crypto and they don't really do any of their due diligence. They have ridiculous expectations. A lot of problems with that in this space. A lot of this comes back to just general education about investing and marketing psychology and market psychology for investing. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about that.
Or when it's suggested or implied that the crypto economy is somehow an improvement on the regular capitalist economy we've all been using for a long time, there's not really a massive leap in terms of improvements in how, arguably there's this more efficiency, but in terms of the human behavior, we see very similar activities, in the regular capitalist society.
Yeah, I would say the major difference is the decentralization aspect, that anyone can start their own crypto. Anyone can easily invest in crypto. You can do it anonymously. You could do it without providing identification, so there's a lot less barrier of entry, and it's very decentralized. That's kind of the main improvement. But with decentralization and anonymity, there's a lot less accountability. There's a lot less regulation. There's a lot more room for scams and things like that, where you might not even know who the founder is. I mean, Richard Hart, his real name is actually Richard Schuler, for example. Not that that's a huge discrepancy. It's not like he's anonymous, but I always find it weird that a lot of these founders use pseudonyms and they never go by their real name for some reason. It seems to be the case a lot for these more sketchy projects. Yeah, just an interesting note there.
Yeah, and it's good that you brought up decentralization, because I've been trying to wrap my head around that for a while, and it seems like, fair enough, Hex is a smart contract on Ethereum. The infrastructure is decentralized, but from my understanding, the decentralization was supposed to remove middlemen and allow this peer-to-peer activity, where it seems like what it's actually done is created a dictator, basically. Like, people can come in, they can become this authoritative figure amongst a bunch of other people by issuing their token, and you kind of, it feels a bit like you lose one of the major value propositions of blockchain technology because of the human element again. So is it fair to say that most crypto scams boil down to whether or not they have a king? Whether the infrastructure can be decentralized, whatever, democratic, and everything, but if you've got a king at the top who has this OA address, arguably probably lots of DeFi companies, these are centralized corporations that are piggybacking on a decentralized infrastructure, and yet they get to call themselves decentralized. But
yeah, so yeah, that's a really good point, because technically Hex is decentralized, but for the first year, he was freely able to manipulate the price however he wanted. Now, he can't do that, but it's already baked in. So it's like, is it truly decentralized? I wouldn't say so. I mean, the design is, but the core concept and the original kind of design that he created for a sort of a loophole for himself within the decentralized ecosystem is the major issue. A lot of platforms say that they're decentralized, and they're not. It's kind of become a buzzword. Even Uniswap, where like it's the largest, decentralized exchange on Ethereum, not very long ago, they were forced to remove a ton of tokens, and they did that. So, how decentralized is that really? If the SEC can, open a case and then tell them to remove a bunch of tokens, and they do it. Namely, those tokens were futures and synthetic assets, like mirrored stock assets. I think essentially the SEC is trying to prevent Ethereum from competing with the stock market. Every other exchange that previously had tokenized stocks has removed all of them. So that seems clear to me. But yeah, a lot of things that claim to be decentralized are not. A lot of what I do is looking into that for decentralized social media projects. Out of the hundreds that I've reviewed, only a few are actually decentralized, right? And almost all of them claim to be decentralized, or, just writing blockchain in your tagline, most people will assume that it's decentralized. Or even just crypto at all, people just assume that it's free speech, decentralized, a lot of these qualities that come with what you would assume like an actual fully integrated blockchain platform like Hive, for example, that is fully decentralized. Everything is on the blockchain. There's no one who can, get in the way and be a middleman. There's no backdoor or any kind of weird concepts that are baked in. So I would say Hive is a great example of true decentralized, truly decentralized platform. They've got marketplaces, social media platforms, pretty much everything. And that is truly decentralized, even down to, like the ownership of your account. Like there's no forgot your password, because no one can do that for you, because everything is on you and it's just on the blockchain. That's a really good example of actual decentralization. Now, a terrible example would be like Facebook was trying to start Libra a while back. And they said, well, if we give 1% of our company to 100 companies, now it's decentralized. But it's decentralized across the wealthiest, most powerful companies in the world. So, it's very interesting the way that people look at decentralization on like a spectrum. Whereas, Facebook will say, if 100 different people have 1% stake, then that is decentralized. Where real decentralization is like using the blockchain. It's community led. There's no actual authoritative leadership. No one can make an administrative decision by themselves or veto a decision, things like that. You don't really see that in a lot of projects. And even if, you've built Hex on smart contracts, for the first year, it had that kind of loophole baked in. And now going forward, technically Hex is essentially a legitimate project, but there's all this sketchy stuff baked in when it was originally, getting started in the first year. And I would still say, with all the fees and all the weird fee structure and all that kind of stuff, still makes it pretty sketchy. But it was 100%, very, very sketchy, when you could easily just manipulate the price. And there was really no way for us to know if he actually did that, or to prove that it was him. So, he kind of just gets off scot-free.
I'm thinking about how this industry may evolve in the future, and how certain projects, other people have also spoken about decentralization as a spectrum. And although all these projects use it in their marketing material as if they're, legit decentralized completely, it's kind of foreign to most people entering the space. And I wonder if you see the potential for some sort of in industries. I'm not exactly sure how it would work, but an industry sort of certificate of decentralization, or a mark of decentralization, or some sort of point system, right? And I was thinking, been looking at this NFT stuff, and I thought, well, organic food often has this kind of logo, like a brand, a mark on it to say, some government organization or whatever has put their stamp of approval on this product. It is genuine organic. Do you reckon we'll see something like that evolve for services in this industry, so that newcomers like myself, or other people, can look at this mark somehow, and perhaps, rather than it being a centralized organization going around and putting a stamp on everything, it somehow has some community governance, or some more smart contract tooling, if you like, baked into it. So that the way to achieve, so it can't be gamed, essentially. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you can imagine happening?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to be able to have some sort of like standard or certification when it's decentralized, because then it's like, how are you going to manage that? Who's got the authority to actually check that? Who's actually qualified? Um, I think it's very, very challenging to do that without introducing like a centralized entity, and then you're kind of getting away from decentralization. I guess it depends at what level. Generally, everyone in the crypto space is comfortable with decentralization, and what level of decentralization is required to meet their standard of it actually being decentralized. Because again, if you have some sort of like entity that is going to be checking if you're really decentralized or not, then you get into a lot of issues. I mean, Etherscan and CoinMarketCap do their best to try to flag certain projects as scams or not. And while I find that that's, very helpful, I also think that that could easily become a problem where if you have an army of cult like followers, you say go and claim that this is a scam, and you get enough people to just mass report something, you could pretty much get anything done by doing this. So it's like a double-edged sword, and I don't think a truly decentralized community could accept something like that. But I do see something like that happening, though. To your point, I expect that that probably will be the case. Just I would never actually consider it like a legitimate way to determine if something was decentralized, because again, when I look around, most people have no idea what is decentralized or not. My definition is, you know, is someone able to come in and decide that I can't do something, or is there any kind of prevention from someone, or do I have to ask permission to do something? So for me, I always point to Hive as like the best example, because it's decentralized all the way from your account to the posts you make to your funds to how you transfer the funds and use the funds, and everything is publicly available. So I mean, it's not anonymous, but it is, everyone's held accountable to what they do. And I think that's probably one of the better models. And it's also community moderated, and the community votes for witnesses or sort of like governance who lead the chain in different directions. So I think that is, and you could take away your vote at any time if you think that they're doing something wrong. And Tron, Justin Sun from Tron, did a hostile takeover originally of Steam, and that went very poorly. Binance, Huobi, and Probit all colluded in this, very, very sketchy. And because of that, all the people got together in the community and they said, this isn't right, we have to fix this. So they cloned Steam, and then they made Hive. And that's what we have now is Hive. Steam was the original platform, the oldest social media platform on the blockchain. And then they had that issue, and they've fixed it. So that's the power of decentralization, where someone can come in and try to mess with it, but if you have a truly decentralized system, everyone can just leave and port over to a copy of that, where you can then fix whatever issues happened. Essentially, the issue was that Justin Sun was able to buy a large enough portion of stake and then request user funds from exchanges. I don't know how they allowed this, but they did. They gave him all of the user funds, and then he was able to essentially have more than 51% stake of the entire blockchain. And then he was like taking money right out of people's accounts and stuff like that. So pretty crazy. But then, we were able to deal with that with Hive, and they made that so that could never happen again. But that's the issue of centralization. You've got all these exchanges, they all collude together. It only took 3 exchanges and the founder of Tron, and they were able to get this done. It's crazy that there's not more coverage on this, but it happened about a year and a half ago.
Interesting. Sounds like a documentary of its own.
I've covered it a little bit, but it could easily be its own documentary for sure.
Is there? I'll just ask. Is there anybody else you recommend that I talk to, off the top of your head, in regards to Hex?
Yes, absolutely. There's someone who's really good for this. I did an interview with Richard Sanders, and I'll put you in contact with him. We specifically talked about Hex for a good while and BitClout. I can also send you that interview if you want to just brush up on that. But Richard Sanders has been doing crypto and cybersecurity investigations for quite some time. He was involved in the investigation for the Ian Bellina hack. It was a major, major hack. He was a pretty prominent guy who got a lot of cryptocurrency, and then it was all stolen. He was involved in the investigation to get that back, and in a lot of pretty pretty popular hacks and investigations that he was a part of dealing with. So I would say he's a really good guy for that. He's much more of an expert, I would say, than I am, and he'll tell you all the same things about Hex and BitClout and any of these kind of sketchy projects. And a lot of it just comes down to very simply, people coming in have ridiculous expectations. A lot of it is just about education. A lot of people coming into the crypto space treat it like, penny stocks. It's like when someone gets into investing and they say, what should I do? And you say, well, you should invest in blue chip companies. And then they just start investing in penny stocks and they throw all their money into penny stocks. That's what's happening, but with crypto. But there's way less accountability, and it's more complex. They don't understand it as well. So, it's like the penny stocks, but like times 100, I would say, in terms of how quickly things can go wrong, as we've seen with recently with Squid Game token. You had all the major mainstream outlets. They were all reporting, oh, this token's going up 3,800% in a week. This token's up 44,000% in the month. They were all perpetuating this. And then the next week, it's like, it's apparently a scam. Like, who would have known? And it's like, well, you guys were, posting about this with completely insane expectations, and they weren't really, doing any due diligence. They're just writing about it, promoting it. That's what happens with a lot of these things. They get some sort of mainstream promotion, and they're obviously not qualified, or they're not going to look into these things enough to actually know if they're safe. And then they perpetuate that to everyone else. And then you've only got small channels like myself and some others who are actually, doing a deep dive and sharing the other side of the coin. But most people aren't really looking into, random small channels. They just see, Hex is in the top 20 or whatever. And then they want to buy it. So, yeah.